Hi, it's Lauren, and welcome back to my craft room. I'm excited to share with you my final Magic Picture Changer die for my Interactive Element of the Month series for December. I have made a Valentine's Day card using the new special delivery from Lawn Fawn, and I have created this scene. So there's a lot of stamping and masking in this card to create a seamless scene between my background, my frame, and the actual interactive element. So I hope you enjoy this video and it inspires you to try it yourself. Because we're going to be doing a lot of layering and stamping and masking, I cut out my 4 pieces of paper and used a pencil to write on the back of them what each paper was. So I'm going to be starting with my Magic Picture Changer papers, so my pocket and my pull tab. And I'm going to be stamping along the 3-inch line of my Misty. That is the middle of all of my papers. I'm also centering my frame from the add-on die set because that is going to be the window of my Magic Picture Changer, and I want to make sure that what I am stamping is centered to that window. So first I have my pull tab piece, so this is going to be the surprise inside, and I want my owl to be holding a letter in its beak. So I am stamping its little beak first, and then I'm going to stamp it on a post-it note so I can create a mask. I place the mask on the nose, and then I'm going to get out the stamp. This is all from the special delivery stamp set by Lawn Fawn. And I'm going to get out this little envelope with the heart sticker on the back. So I'm going to stamp that, and then I'm also going to create a mask. So I'm putting that same post-it note, stamping it down, fussy cutting it out, and placing it on the envelope. I also use my tweezers to help make sure I am putting them in the right spot. Now forgive my hair, but I wanted to line up the nose of my owl on top of that masked nose. So I stamp my owl out, and now I can remove those masks, and you can see my little owl looks like he's holding his little note. Now on the pocket part of the Magic Picture Changer, the owl is not going to have a note, so I'm just going to stamp him while he's on my Misty right onto that paper. And I'm also going to create a mask. So I've stamped that onto the post-it note, and I used the die to cut him out. And next I'm going to work on the different wings. Again, forgive my hair, but I'm trying to be precise on this. And I stamped the wings down for the pocket, and I'm going to create a mask of those wings as well with post-it notes. And then I'm going to switch out my owls. And now for the pull tab part, I'm going to change it to the open wings, like my owl is excited that he got a letter. So I'm lining those up, and I'm going to stamp that as well. I'm using jet black from Lawn Fawn as I'm going to be using my alcohol inks. So now that that's stamped and I've created a mask, I'm going to also cut those out with their corresponding dies. So now I am going to stamp mountains behind my owl. So I'm putting my mask on, making sure that it's centered and everything looks good. And I realize that I probably should stamp the background of my largest paper first, so I know exactly where my owls are going to be and where the mountains are going to be. So I'm taking my paper, it's slightly larger than 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so I can use my largest stitch rectangle. And I'm placing the mountains where I want them to be. I'm centering my window of my frame to the card because that's where I'm going to attach my mechanism. So I put a piece of scrap paper behind it, place my paper centered to that 3-inch line, and I stamp my mountain scene. Now I ran my frame piece through the die, and I'm going to line that frame up exactly where I will plan to glue it to the card, stamp again, and now I have my mountains on my frame as well. So now I'm going to use this die cut piece to line up where the mountains are going to go on my owls. I have washed and dried my mountain stamp set, forgive my hair again, and that way I can line it up to the frame and stamp it on my masked owls. So here is the pull tab, and now I'm going to stamp the same thing on my owl on the pocket part. Again, lining up my papers to be that 3-inch mark in the center. I repeat the same process on the pocket piece with my owl with his wings down. And now that I'm done with the stamping, I realize I need to create some masks because I am going to do some blending with my Distress Oxides. So I stamp my mountains on one piece of cardstock and I die cut my mountains on the other, and I'm using some pixie spray on the back of these masks just to help keep them in place. So I'm going to show you how I distressed one of the 4 pieces because I didn't want this video to be terribly long and it's basically the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to be creating some green grass on my card, and I wanted to kind of create a softer green background. So I'm using cracked pistachio and I'm starting with that color, making sure to not get any ink underneath my masks. Once I'm happy with that, I am also going to use pine needles, and it is a little bit darker, but I thought it blended really well with picked pistachio. I think they both kind of have that brighter green look to it. And once I was happy with that, I used my water spritzer to activate the oxide and create kind of a painted splatter look. I'm getting out my Prima Metallics and I'm spritzing some onto this green watercolor, metallic watercolor, and splattering that onto my grass. So now we can pick up the mask and reveal our beautiful green hillside. So I'm going to clean up my little magnetic board here, and I'm going to put my owl mask back on. I'm going to put the mountains offset just a little bit to create that white border like the rest of my images have. And I'm going to be coloring my sky pink. I thought this would be pretty for Valentine's Day, and I thought they went really pretty with that bright green that I chose. So I'm starting with spun sugar, and I'm going to blend in picked raspberry because this is nice, really pretty pink glowing sky. I'm going to spray it with my sprayer as well, and then I'm going to splatter on some of the pink metallic ink from my Prima watercolors. Once I was happy with that, I'm going to pick up this last mask, and as you can see, my beautiful distressed background is done. So I'm going to repeat the process, and here you can see it on all 4 of my pieces. Now it's time to do some coloring. I'm going to zoom in here and just show you a little bit of my alcohol coloring. I'm starting with purples. I thought the purple mountains would be really pretty with my pink sky and green grass. So I'm starting with my darkest purple, going around the mountains. I'm still trying to create that same white line look around my images, so I place my masks on to help me with placing color down. Now the alcohol ink does bleed through the Post-it note. It is very thin, but it's at least helping guide my coloring, so that way I can keep that white border around my owl. Once I'm done coloring with my 3 shades of purple, I'm going to pick up the mask and see how I did. It was a little close to my owl, but that's okay. I just used my white gel pen to add some white and brighten up that border. I thought the snow on my mountains could use some reflective of the pink sky, so I just used some pink alcohol and blended out the color a bit with my colorless blender. Now for my owl, I'm using 3 shades of brown. I really need to expand my Illustrator collection because my owl is a little darker than I would like it to be, but that's okay. He's cute and I like him the way he turns out. So I'm using my brown shades I have from my Illustrator markers and coloring in this owl. I received a 36 pack of these Spectrum Noir markers as a Christmas present, and I'm really happy that I can add more colors to this collection within the same color family. I'm looking up online all the time different packs that I want to get next. So now that my owl is done, I colored in his little cheeks, and I'm going to color in his little note card and beak and feet. I'm using yellows for his beak and feet, and then I'm also coloring in the note card with this cream color just to give it some contrast. Now that that's all done colored, I'm just adding in some dots just to add some texture to my mountains. I think it goes well with the splattered background look, so it gives all of my images and coloring a type of splatter. So I'm going in with the darkest color for all of my different colored in images and adding in some little dots. Once that's done, I'm bringing in my white gel pen just to add some highlights in different spots of my owl, the note card, and the mountains, thinking of how the light would hit the mountains just to add a little bit of dimension. And I completed coloring and highlighting all 4 of my pieces. So now I can run my largest background piece with the stitched rectangle, and I'm using my frame that's already cut out as a guide to make sure that my frame will be centered onto my card. I'm using some low tack purple tape to keep that in place, and I run it through my die cut machine. I'm going to do the same for both of these pieces. So for the pocket, I'm going to line up where the center needs to be, use some purple tape to keep that down. It takes me a little while to figure out that I also need to tape down my paper. It keeps moving, and that one little piece of tape was not enough. So I turned that horizontal just to give it a little more to stick to. So I'm centering the die square where the frame is, and I'm using purple tape to keep that die down. And then I'm going to pull out the frame, and now I just have the die cut with the paper. I'm going to run that through my machine. Next, I'm going to do that same exact process again with the pull tab. And I realize here that I made my pull tab a little short. I forget that the pull tab is a little bit higher. My image is a little higher on the paper, so it won't be a big deal. When I glue on my arrow to pull the paper up, I just have to pay attention to that. I also cut out the top part of the pull tab in that extra distressed background. So now that my magic picture changer pieces are done, I am folding along the score lines and adding some super sticky score tape that's 1/8 of an inch thick along those little flaps. I'm using my bone folder to make sure that there is a nice seal. I'm folding over to create my pocket, and I'm using my embossing tool here to get baby powder all over all of these die cut lines. I want to make sure there's nothing sticky about them. There's no extra, anything that would hold up these papers from moving. So I put the mechanism together, putting a generous amount of baby powder everywhere, and I'm pulling the pull tab back and forth to make sure that there is nothing sticking. I'm happy that it's moving well, so I'm going to go ahead and fold up my pocket. I use my score again to make sure there's a nice good seal of that tape. Now that I'm happy with it, it's still moving, everything looks good, I'm going to put on my pull tab. So I do have to make sure it's a little bit lower than normal because I did have that little piece missing. So I glued it down, and I'm just making sure my glue dries. And I decided instead of cutting another arrow out, I flipped over that piece and used my darkest purple alcohol marker to add color to the arrow, and I glued it in. There's still a little bit of stickiness, so I added more baby powder and it seems to be working better. Now I'm gluing on the frame. You only apply tape to the top and bottom of the frame and then to the inside and outside corners of that window. I'm releasing the tape and I'm going to line up the little divot in the die to the divot where the pull tab is coming up from. Making sure it's centered and secured, my mechanism is now put together. So I'm going to add some strong sticky tape, line up my mountains, and glue this onto the background. And now, as you can see, I have a seamless image, whether the pull tab is open or closed. So I'm using that strong sticky tape again, and I'm going to adhere this background piece to a card base. This is an A2 size, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now that the tricky part is done, I also stamped and masked a cute little red postal bird as well as some clouds that I colored with a little bit of pink. I didn't record how I put these together because I thought you could probably figure out how to mask and color these images on your own after showing so much masking in this video. I also stamped special delivery on a wavy border die. And I'm gluing these clouds just to add a little bit more interest to the sky. And I'm figuring out how I'm going to adhere my little wavy saying here with my little red Valentine bird. And I've attached her to the card with some wet glue, and I added a little dimensional just to help that wing that was sticking out. Now I needed to add a little bit more bling, of course, so I'm using these little dots that I found from a big name brand store, and I'm adding them using my jewel picker and some wet glue in various spots around the card. They are white, but they're super small, so I feel like they add sparkle and without adding too much of another color onto the card. So now that that is done, pick up my mess, and here is my final look of the card. So here is my image closed, and with the pull tab, my image looks seamless again with my owl and its happy little note. I hope you enjoyed this series of the Magic Picture Changer die. It was a lot of fun to come up with these ideas, and I hope I inspired you to try it out yourself. Please hit like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.